This conference will now be recorded.
So thank you once again, everyone, for joining today's session. So, s- okay. So yesterday, it was a demo session. So we discussed about these 4 points. What is performance testing? Why performance testing? What is LoadRunner architecture? We have recorded a simple flow and we have replayed it. We understood the high level piece of code that got generated, and we have also gone through the course content. Okay, so if you have any questions related to the yesterday session, I mean, you can ping in the chat window. We can discuss at the end. Whoever is joining just today, whoever has joined just today and missed yesterday's session, kindly request you to go through yesterday's recording once, so that you will get more clarity about know what is this course about, and other details as well. And if you have any other questions related to course, you can ping me post session, okay, in the WhatsApp. So in today's session, we are going to discuss about types of performance testing. Okay, I do have a separate slide. I do have a separate slides to explain these concepts, but I would prefer to use this notepad to explain the different types of performance testing today. However, I'll be sharing the slides as well later on. Okay. So in general, the definition what we discussed yesterday about the performance testing is checking the performance of an application by applying some load, right? So this was the definition which we discussed yesterday, a generic definition. Okay. So here, what do you mean by load? Load means the number of users accessing the application and performing some tasks. Like it can be, I mean, if you take a bank application, what are the different tasks that a user can perform? Like transfer money, download statement, paying credit card bill, applying a loan, whatever it is, right? So load means some number of users accessing the application, and with that load, how the application is performing, how it is responding. When a particular user is navigating from one page to another page, how much time it is taking. Okay, so those things needs to be considered. Now in today's session, we are discussing types of performance testing. So when when it is when we have to discuss about performance testing, it's not all about applying load and running the test. I mean, there are different types of performance testing that we do. I'm going to list all of them now, and we'll discuss each one of it. The first one is load testing. Okay. Second one is stress testing. Okay. Third one, endurance, or you can also call it as soak, or you can also call it as duration test. Fourth one, you can say, let's say, scalability test. Okay. Fifth one, let's say, volume test. Okay. Sixth, failover test. Okay. Seven, spike testing. Okay. I mean, this is not required, but we'll discuss what is smoke testing. It's not something specific to performance, but in general, we'll discuss smoke testing also. Okay. So in today's session, we are going to discuss about these five and these two. Failover testing we will discuss in the next session. Okay. So the reason why we will discuss in the next session is we need to cover some dependent topics, like what is a server, what is web server, what is application server, what is database server. So we need to discuss those concepts first and then discuss about failover testing. So there's a dependency. That's the reason we will cover these topics. Okay, this topic next time. Okay, so let's discuss load test first. So before going to load test, I mentioned the definition of performance testing, like checking the performance of an application by applying some load. Okay, in general, I mean, outside of software, if you discuss about a generic load test, we have taken the example of a lift, right, yesterday. So if the lift capacity is max 10 persons, so when all 10 persons are inside the lift, and then if they press some 3 or 4 button, then how fast it is, how much time it is taking to go to fourth floor, right? So when one person is there in the lift, how it is performing? When all 10 persons are there, how it is performing? So that's the load. And one more important point is, generally performance testing, okay, in short PT, is measured in terms of speed, okay, stability and scalability. Speed, stability and scalability. Okay, so remember these words. We will discuss. We will relate these words with the types of test here. So let's go with the load testing. What do you mean by load test? So load test is nothing but checking the speed of the application. Okay, so I just now told, right? Performance testing is measured in terms of speed. It is one of the criteria. So checking the speed of the application by applying, okay, some load. So what do you mean by checking the speed of the application? So that's it. Like how fast the users are able to navigate from one page to another page. Um, okay, how fast the pages are loading. Is there any slowness? Okay, so load test is all about checking the speed of the application by applying load. So what do you verify here mainly? We verify response times. Okay, yesterday I showed you, right? Like when you replay, how much time login is taking, how much time launch is taking, how much time log off is taking. So we will verify that. I mean, whenever we are doing a performance testing for any specific scenario, and within that scenario, you have some steps, right? You have some specific steps. So, which we call it as transaction. So we will verify the performance of each of those steps, like launch, login, and all those things. So verify the response times. Industry standard is 2 seconds. Yesterday we discussed, right? Industry standard is 2 seconds, which we call it as SLA. Okay, service level agreement. So service level agreement means it is the agreement between client and the application team. So client says that, hey, for our application, whenever a user clicks any button or link or whatever the action the user performs, the response should come within 2 seconds. So based on that, the development team should work accordingly. Okay, so that means development team's responsibility is not only to develop the functionality, but also develop the code, write a code in such a way that it performs well in terms of speed. Okay, so we verify the response times. So generally, we depending on the SLA, a general industry standard SLA is 2 seconds. However, it can differ from project to project. In some projects, it can be 3 seconds, 5 seconds also. If the client agrees, okay, then that should be fine. Okay, so this is the first thing. Then for how long this load test should run? The load test will run for 1 hour steady state. Okay, I will tell you what is steady state later, but uh, it will run for 1 hour duration. Okay, load test will always run for 1 hour duration. In that 1 hour duration, how the application is performing. Okay, and here load means number of users. I'm going to write it again here. Number of users. Okay, let's say load test is, let's say you're testing any bank application. Let's say the load means that is the number of users given by client is 500. They can give you like this, 500. Now, if the client is asking you to test the application with 500 users, that will be your load. So 500 users will work on that application. They might perform some different actions. See, checking the speed of the application by applying some load is a definition. Load means number of users. What is that you verify? We verify the response times. Generally, the SLA is 2 seconds. For how long it will run? It will run for 1 hour. Okay. It will run for 1 hour. And we also verify for for errors also. Like, is there any errors? Okay, like, is the script passing or not? Like, there are different errors, like 400, 404, 500, 401, 403. We will discuss all those types of errors later, but generally we also verify for errors. Ideally, the error should not exceed, okay, the errors or failures basically should not exceed 3 to 5%. Basically, we some projects will take it 2 only, 2%. Max it can take 2 to 3% you can take. So let's say, I mean, you have 100 steps or 100 transactions. In 1 hour, you are running for 1,000 times. Let's say 1,000 transactions are there. 3% means 30 errors. I mean, you should not get more than 30 failures out of 1,000. Okay. So if you're getting more than 30, then that test is said to be a failed test. Okay. We'll discuss more about this later. But primarily, load test is all about this. Checking the speed of the application by applying some load. Okay. So hope you got some clarity. What is load test? This is the first major test that we do. This is the first major test that we run as a performance tester. Okay, from performance testing perspective, this is the first major test that we run. If this test itself is a failure, then you cannot proceed and run next set of tests like stress testing, endurance testing. You'll not perform those tests. Okay, if you want to perform those tests, this test should be successful first. There's a dependency, right? So if the first major test itself is a failure, there is no point in going ahead and running the other types of tests. Okay, any questions so far? Did you understand what is a load test? We will see all these things practically in our upcoming sessions, but I want you to understand that there are different types of performance testing, and this is one of the major type of tests that we perform. Any questions so far?
Yeah, sorry,
Okay,
I have a question about the errors. You mentioned that if there are errors more than 30%, we shouldn't
three
proceed.
percent.
Sorry, 3%.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Hmm. Because see, why we call it as a failed test when the errors are exceeding three? Not errors, I say. I mean, I would say failure transactions. Okay, we will discuss about that failure transactions later. But if the failure transactions are more than 3%, why we call it as a failed test? Because the purpose of running a load test is to apply, the peak load and then see how the application is performing. And when you see many failures during the test, okay, and because of those failures, the peak load might not be applied. Okay, then in that case, we cannot determine the exact performance of the application. And if there are so many failures just because that you applied the full load, then that should be corrected. See, the errors can be just because you applied a full load, the peak load. Okay, that means let's say 500 users, if they are concurrently running on the application and performing various actions, and then you get to see some errors, that means you need to rectify it. Okay, probably those errors can be uh, just coming only if you apply a full load. That means, only if 500 users are working concurrently. Maybe only if 50 users are running, then you might not see those errors. Okay, so just when the load is applied, and if you see some sort of errors exceeding 3%, or I mean, or 2 to 3%, then you have to fix those errors. If the errors are from your side, I mean, if the errors are from your script side, you have to fix it. If the errors are from the application side, you have to analyze further and tell the developer that, hey, these are the errors that I observed during the load test. Okay, so they have to fix it. Once they fix it, you have to run the load test again, and then if it is successful, you have to move to the next type of test. Okay, so and do we really need to run other types of tests? Can't we run only load test and stop it? Yes, you can. It all depends on the project. It all depends on the client. Okay. So I mean, it depends on, completely depends on project and client. Okay. So now let's move to the next type of test, that is stress testing. So stress testing, as the name suggests, we are applying more stress on the application. That means you are running the test with more number of users than the load test. Okay, so let's say in general, if I say executing, or you can write like this: applying more load on the application, okay, than the load test. So let's say, for example, in the above load test, okay, I have taken some number like 500. So in load test, in load test, if I go with 500 users, then here in stress test, okay, you can go with, like 600 or 700, 600, 700, 800. You can go, I mean, you can run any number more than the load test. That means you are applying more stress on the application. So basically load test itself, we will run with the peak load, peak number of users. So beyond that, you are applying stress. That becomes a stress test. Okay, and you can run to an extent where you can find the break point also, break even point also. That means your system will break, so you can run to that extent also. If your client is demanding you to run a test until the application breaks or the system breaks, you can go ahead and run the test. You can go ahead and run. Let's say 600, it's working fine. 700, it's working fine. 800, it's working fine. 900, it can crash. Okay, so if your client is asking you to find that break even point, you can go ahead and keep on adding the users. For how long you will run, it depends again. You can run it within 1 hour also. For example, okay, for example, you begin the 1 hour test. For the first 15 minutes, you begin with 500 users. Okay, then you increase another 200 users, let's say 700 users, from 16th minute to 30th minute. Arvish, right? You can schedule the scenario like that. Then from you can add another 200 from 31st minute to 33rd minute. Sorry, 35th minute. Like that. Like that, you can keep on adding. You can apply stress. Okay, and you can keep on running as long, I mean, until it breaks. Okay, but ideally, what generally in stress testing we apply, I mean, a little bit more stress, like 600, 700, then we stop it. I mean, okay, it is accepting, it is handling, or the application is able to withstand more number of users than the load test, then that should be fine. Okay, so you can take an example. Like for example, you can take an example of a restaurant. Let's say there are, I'm just giving a generic example. In that restaurant, there is a table. Let's say there are 5 tables. Okay, there is an owner and there are 5 tables and there is one helper. Now, the helper is able to take the orders from those 5 tables, and the helper is able to deliver the food, let's say within 20 minutes. Now, because of increase in demand, the owner increased the number of tables from 5 to, let's say, 7. Now the helper should handle all 7 tables. Okay, the helper is able to manage 7 tables, but the amount of time taken to deliver the food to all the 7 tables increased from 20 minutes to 30 minutes. Now still there is more demand. The customers keep on, coming. So the owner decided to increase the number of tables from 7 to 9. Then the helper said, no, no, that's enough. I cannot do it anymore. That means that's the max he can deliver. So For 7 tables also he was able to manage with more delivery time. I mean, he was taking more time than the normal time, right? So, but when the number of tables were increased to 9, he said, that's it, I cannot do it. Okay. So that means that's the max, that's the break even point, right? So something like that. So here also, because the number of users are more than the load test, okay, in that case, how the application is responding, okay, how the application is responding, okay, what are the response times, are there any errors, any major errors, okay, so all these things we have to find out. So any questions? So did everyone understand stress testing? So it's simple, applying more load than on the application than the load test. That means you are stressing the application beyond the peak load. Okay.
Kaushik, I have
So
one question.
yeah, tell me.
Yes, the difference between the load test and stress test is nothing but it is low stress is nothing but max TPS scaling. Am I correct?
Sorry, your voice was breaking. Can you be just little bit slow and can you tell again?
Yeah, okay. The load stress is there, na? That is actually we are applying the load for the max TP scaling. That application can hold this much of users can allow. Am I correct?
No, no. The load test will be performed. So here, who is giving this
Okay,
500 users to you? Here, okay, I have to run a load test. Load means I'm saying number of users. No, who is giving this 500 to me? Client will give you, or the application team will give you this 500 number of users to you. I mean, it can also be the number of users. Parallelly, they can also give you something called TPH, which we call it as transactions per hour. Okay, which we'll discuss in our upcoming session again. So, who is going to give you this client? On what basis they will give you? So, let's say if the application is already there. Okay, if the application is already there since last 2-3 years all there, now the client said, hey, can you just perform one more round of load testing and let me know. Now how he is giving this number to you? Okay, say how did he come to know that this is the max load, this is the peak load? By analyzing the historical data, by analyzing the past trends. Okay, let's say in the last 6 months, during which month or which day there were more number of people accessing the application. So that peak load, he will take it, the client will take it and give it to us. So that will become your input for load test. Okay, so it's all about the peak
okay,
load in the past. Okay, so let's say generally if you take us any US applications, so they have something called Thanksgiving Day, right? So during that time, more normally the load will be more, so they can give some load, I mean some numbers from that in the past 6 months, 1 year. Even we have some big sale, something like that. Even we see you know let's say in a week, the bank is off for 2-3 days, or bank let's say the bank application might be down for 1 or 2 days for some maintenance. So before that day, I mean there might be more number of users. Considering all these holidays, whatever it is, in the past 6 months or 1 year, during which month, which day, more number of people accessing the application, they can take that number as input and give it to us as a peak load. Okay, so who will give this to
okay,
us? Either client or the application team, they will provide this data to us.
okay.
Okay, so that is about
Got it.
load testing and
Yeah,
stress
yeah.
testing. Now another
I
important,
just have a question, Kaushik, actually. What is the significance of stress testing?
I mean, see, sometimes what will happen, okay, we have run the load test. Okay, we have run the load test and everything is working fine, but sometimes what happens in real time, um, there might be some users accessing, more number of users accessing the application. That means beyond the max, beyond the load, beyond the peak load, there might be some more number of users accessing the application. So the client here wants to determine if any such thing happen, will the application sustain? Will my application be able to withstand more amount of load than the peak? Okay, so that means the client wants to know whether my application is able to withstand the withstand more amount of load. Simple.
So you
Okay,
mean
the client
it's based on the future perspective?
Yes, I mean future perspective, you can consider that as a scalability test. Generally, that's a different thing. So when you say future perspective, the client will it's a different thing. So in that case, the client will think that, hey, my business might grow 200%, 300% in next 1 year or 2 years. So in that case, it comes under scalability. Okay, so it's a just a type of test just to ensure that whether my application is able to handle little more stress than the actual load. Okay, and if the client wants, they can continue to run and see where it breaks also. It all depends. So it's like a customized type of testing. So it all depends on what client wants you to do. If client doesn't know anything about performance testing, you can guide according to the process. Okay, but sometimes what will happen, client knows more, and client knows something about performance testing, but client wants us to do some customized testing according to their requirement. Okay, so I'll tell you that in the scalability testing part. So I will give you some customized testing example also in the scalability testing in just few minutes from now. Okay,
All right.
so let me explain you the next type of testing: soak, endurance, and duration. So this is another type of important test that we run. So here, if you see, I told you performance test is measured in terms of speed, stability, right? And scalability. So speed, we have referred to load testing. So here, when it comes to endurance, we are using this term stability. So that means, one second. So that means in the endurance testing or soak testing or duration testing, we are verifying the stability of the application. Okay, stability means how long the application can sustain, okay, with some consistent performance. So this type of test, okay, it's all about verifying verifying the stability of the application. So what do you mean by stability? So this test will run for 5 hours, 8 hours, 1 day, etc. You can run for 2 days, 3 days also, but that's very rare. Most common is 3 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours, 1 day. So that means this test will be run for longer duration to check for stability. What do you mean by stability? Stability means, let's say you are running 1 hour, 5 hours endurance test. So stability means how the application is performing in the first 1 hour, how the application is performing in the second 1 hour, how the application is performing in the last hour. Are the response times consistent? See, in the first 1 hour, if the response times are, let's say, 1.5 seconds average, on an average, 1.5 second, 1.8 second, 2 seconds, like that. In the last 1 hour of the test, if the response times are 5 seconds, 4 seconds, 6 seconds, then there is an issue. That means there is no consistency, there is no stability. If your application is running for longer duration, that it is not able to manage, it's not sustainable. Okay, so for that reason, to verify the stability of the application, we run endurance test for longer duration. To begin with, we can run for 3 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours. You can run for 1 day also, and you can run for beyond 1 day also. That's up to you. It all depends on project. But more than 95% we run for 3 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours. Okay, so now here we run for 3 hours, 5 hours. Okay, how the application is responding. Okay, how the application is responding uh, during the test, during the soak test, or it can be called as endurance also, right? So first 1 hour, how it is performing. Second hour, how it is performing. Okay. Then last hour, how it is performing. What are the response times? Okay. When I say how it is performing, we are verifying the response times. Okay. We are verifying response times here also. You got it? One more important thing we verify here is memory leaks. To if there is verify if there is any memory leak. So what do you mean by memory leak? We will discuss. It's a separate topic. We will discuss in our upcoming sessions. Okay, memory leak is something related to the advanced topics. Actually it's outside of LoadRunner, but it's a part of performance testing concept, but it's outside of LoadRunner tool. Anyways, we have a separate session for that. We'll discuss heap dumps, thread dumps, and all. So I'll explain you at that point of time. But as of now, just understand that this test will also assist us in analyzing if there is any memory leak or not. Okay. So there is some concept called garbage collection, memory leak, heap utilization. So all these things we have to understand if you want to discuss about this point. So for time being, just know that we will also try to find out if there is any memory leak or not. Okay, the memory leak can happen in any type of test, but 99% of the times it can happen only in endurance test because it will run for longer duration. When a test is run for a longer duration, there is every chance that you can find a memory leak. Okay, nowadays because of all the recent developments happening, okay, and the garbage collection process is in place automatically, which runs based on some algorithms. The memory leak issues are very rare, but however, if it is found, mostly it will be found in this particular type of test. Okay. Now, one more important point. What is the amount of load that you apply here? Now, here I said in stress testing, little bit more than load test. Then what about the load in endurance test? Okay, in some projects, okay, they go with 100% load. That means whatever the amount of load that you applied in the load test, the same amount of load you apply here also. In some projects, they go with 75% of the load. Okay, so that means, let's say load test you ran with 500 users. Endurance test you have to run with 75%. That is 375 users. Okay, if you are already let's say you are joining a project, if they're already following some trend like 100% or 75%, just follow it. If you are the one who has to decide how much of load to be applied in the endurance test, then better to go with 100% load. Okay, some people say to prefer 75%, but in all the projects that I have worked, okay, as per the past trend, okay, I can guarantee you that more number of projects they will go with 100% load only. Why to reduce the load? First of all, I mean, what is the reason to reduce load? No problem, right? Let it be 100%. We will see what happens. Because in real time also, see, think practically. In real time also, let's say I'm using some application for 4 or 5 hours continuously. Okay, let's say I have some application where I'm practicing some coding. Okay, I have that application online. I logged in. I'm practicing continuously for 3 hours. Okay, likewise, let's say some 100 people continuously practice. Now, is the load reducing anywhere? No. Then why should we reduce? No, not required, right? Let's run with 100% load. That's what I prefer. Okay, so if your project is already following some trend, this sort of trend, you can use it. Otherwise, blindly go with 100%, no problem. Okay, so again, just a recap of the endurance test points. It's all about verifying the stability of the application. Okay, especially when you're running for, basically you run for more number of hours. Like it will run for 5 hours, 8 hours, 1 day, 3 hours also. How the application is responding during the soak test. First 1 hour, how it's responding. Second 1 hour, how it's responding. Last 1 hour, how it's responding. To verify if there is any memory leak as well. In some projects they go with 100% loads. In some projects they'll go with 75% of the load. Any questions? Did you understand endurance test?
I have a question actually.
Yeah, please.
So, if you say 100% of load, for example, my application is being used by millions of users. So, how can I make it, practical?
See, millions of users will. I mean, when there are millions of users, the server won't be the same, right? There might be so many server instances. So they will divide the number of users and target those server instances which might be located at various locations. Okay. So concurrently, I mean, see, first of all, you should have a tool which will support those many number of users. If the tool supports if the tool supports those many number of users, it's all even though I mean it's all about the servers that you have to target. See, let's say you have to test with 1 million users. So 1 million users will not always target one server. It can have multiple server instances. So depending on number of server instances, we will segregate the number of users, okay, targeting to that particular server instances, and we will decide. I mean, we have to prepare our own framework if the number of users are more. That's a different strategy. I mean, that's a different
Uh,
strategy we have to figure
for
out.
example, for example, I have a dedicated environment for performance testing, similar to production, where have all multiple instances of servers and all. So, is it practically possible to test run with millions of users with any performance tool?
Yes. Yes, definitely. It all depends on the number of the license that your organization is purchasing. So currently, currently, let's say the project which I am supporting now, one of the freelancing. So that we are using LoadRunner. It will support 1 lakh users. So I'm just telling you. So it all depends on the license that the organization purchases. Okay, it all depends on the tool the projects are using. Okay, so as long as the tool supports, we can perform whatever the test it might be, because from our end the scripts will be same, the approach will be same. Okay, only thing is internally we can decide how many number of server instances are there. Okay, how we should plan. Okay, how many load generator machines we need. These things we have to think from our side. Other than that, our approach will be same. I mean, based on the license what we have. It all depends on the license. First of all, that's the beginning point. First of all, does our tool supports those many number of users? Yes, it will support, but the organization should be able to purchase that much of license. Okay.
Okay, okay,
uh, yeah. So the
yeah.
next type of test is scalability test. Okay, so this type of test is to just, I mean, again, I told you, right, performance testing is measured in terms of scalability also. Yes, this is all about testing the scalability of the application. So I am not going to tell you any major points here, but I'll tell you one example. Like one of my friend just told that expecting some future growth. Yes. So if your client says that, hey, for my application in the next 1 year, I am expecting a 200% growth. So a 200% growth is what your client is expecting in next 6 months or 1 year. So in that case, you can go ahead and run your scalability test with that number itself. So for example, okay, load test you ran with 500 users. Okay, load test you ran with 500 users. Now your client said future growth is 200% in next 6 months. Now keeping that point in mind, now itself we will run, okay, a test with 200% growth. What is 200% of 500? 100% of 500 is, no, this you have to take it as 100% load test. No, you can count like this. No, this you can also call it as 100% load test, because this is 100%, right? That's what you test in a load test, normal load test. 100% load you apply. So 200% is growth in 6 months. That means 1,000 users increase. So now itself you go ahead and test with 1,500 users. Okay, and tell the client that whether the application will sustain, okay, 200% growth or not. Whether your application should, okay, should concentrate on the scalability part or not. Okay, how scalable is your application? I'll tell you one example. We all know the recent pandemic which started in 2020. Okay, actually couple of years ago, in the second phase or second wave, I mean not second wave exactly, if I remember, I was working for one of the banking firm, a US banking firm. I mean, when the pandemic started, one of the on-site counterpart client, they called us and said, hey, we have a list of applications which you are already working well and good. Now, due to pandemic, we have seen a considerable increase in the number of users accessing the application. Just because of pandemic, the users are not directly going over to the bank for various purposes. They are trying to access, they are trying to complete the task, by accessing the online applications. Now what client said in that meeting is, with this current trend, we are expecting a 400% increase, 400% increase, okay, 400% users increase in next 3 months. That's what they told. And they also told us, please check with, please run, they didn't tell anything like run. They said, please let us know whether all our existing applications with the existing infrastructure, will they sustain 400% load or not. You got my point? The point was straightforward. Will our existing applications with the existing infrastructure, will they sustain 400% increase or not? So what we did, can anyone tell what we have to do? Can anyone tell what we have to do at that point of time? Just guess what we have to do at that point of time. You got the requirement, right? Did you understand what client said? Anyone didn't understand? The client said, currently
We
the
need
number of
to
users are increasing.
increase the instances.
Okay, so
No,
in that case,
no.
I think hello.
Yeah, tell me. No, tell me what should be our
Yeah,
approach.
yeah. So your approach should be you have to revise your user load because there's an increase which has been provided in
Yes,
the requirement that there'll be a 400 percent of increase. So your user load will definitely increase by 400%.
exactly. So do you mean to say, let's take one application. Okay, there are so many applications. Let's target one application. Let's say that application, sample application name is WebTours. Okay, just take for sample application. Now WebTours, normally 100% load is 500 users. Okay, let's take this. Now client told me that due to pandemic, uh, there will be 400% increase. Okay, or there will be 400% increase in the number of users. Okay, now just tell us whether our applications will be able to withstand those many number of users or not. Now what should be your approach now? Okay, now you are saying that you have to test with that 400% increase. Okay, so 100% is 500, then 400% is, let's say, 2000 users. That's what you mean to say? So should I run a
No,
test
there's
with
a four.
400%?
No, so
Maybe
that is 400% increase. So 2000 plus 500. So you would be running it with 2500 users.
Okay, let's take
maybe
that
better
percent
to
also.
gradually increase the load and check
So
with that
But that
50%.
is
exactly.
okay. Okay, yeah. So my next point was since it is said that that's a projection for the next 3 months. So you can do a gradual, gradual testing for that.
Okay. So what do you mean by gradual testing here in practical according to this?
Okay. Okay, so a practical scenario, you can make a real-time scenario where first load test you can do it for say 500. Obviously, you are already doing a 500 user load test for 1 hour. So the next step up test would be with maybe you increase with 200 users more to 500, so it will be 700 users for 1 hour duration. I think that way you would go gradually. I hope.
So
I think yeah,
okay.
that would be the scenario.
Okay, so let's think in that way. So let's say the client
Hmm.
said that max they can reach to 400%. So now I'm just taking 2000 as max, okay, up to 400%. Now, what happens if I run 400% directly? Why
Uh,
can't I run 400% directly with 2000 users?
no, see, obviously you can run if you check with your developers and the infrastructure team that your application can be sustained. But obviously there could be a chance that your server might crash. So that's why you have to go in a very gradual way. So your servers are not crashed.
Exactly. So when we run with 400% or 2000 users directly, if something goes wrong, if something crashes, you will not be able to determine whether this application will be able to withstand 200% and 300%. You can confirm that it is not able to withstand 400, but are you confirming that it is able to withstand 200 and 300? No. That's the reason you have to gradually increase the load here. Okay, so first you have to run a test with 500 users. If this is successful, then go ahead and run for 200%. Okay, then go ahead and run for 200%. If this is also successful, then go ahead and run for 300%. And if this is also successful, then go ahead and run for 400%. Now, in our case, we had some list of 20 to 30 applications. We, as a team, were supporting those. So we figured out that like approximately 15 to 20% of the applications, they were able to withstand 400% of load also. Only some 8 to 10 applications were failing or crashing at 300%. So what was the immediate solution that we provided to client is, because that is a pandemic, because we don't have time, the only immediate solution what they have to do is to scale out. Okay, to scale out or scale up. That's the point of scale out means, I mean, I'll tell you in tomorrow's session. Basically it's adding additional servers and all those stuff. If you mean scale up, it's all about upgrading the existing servers infrastructure in terms of RAM, CPUs and all, and then so that it will be able to sustain or able to withstand the 400% load also. Okay, so that's how you have to plan. So I mean, sometimes the requirement can be ad hoc also. You cannot always predict or you cannot always perform a normal routine test. There will be some kind of ad hoc requirement that will come to you. I'll give you so many examples going forward. Okay, a practical examples where we implemented this a particular scenario and all those stuff. We have so many concepts coming up like rendezvous point, okay, and some spike testing kind of thing. So we will discuss. Okay, so this is about scalability test, and this test will also run for 1 hour only. Okay, we verify the performance of an application. Okay, and especially we see the how the infrastructure is supporting. Okay, how the infrastructure is supporting. Should we scale out, should we scale up, what should we do? That we have to decide based on the outcome of the test. Okay, simple, straightforward only. Okay, so now
Krishik, I
we
have
have,
one question.
yeah, tell me.
So when we talk about scalability testing and say the client has asked you to do, okay, not going with a scenario of like what you cited. Say for example, the client has given that in the next 3 months or in the next 6 months, this would be the growth. So as a part of a general release, will you do scalability test and if you do a scalability test, is it like recommended that the client should go with scaling up the infra, or they can also not increase the infra right away or maybe in the next 3 months if your application, say for example, is able to sustain a 3%, 300% increase, 300% load that you told, like with 1500 users, it was able to sustain successfully.
See, yeah, good question actually. So it all depends on the project. So for example,
Yeah.
okay, let's take two examples. Two examples is, first example is, that's a new app, it's a new application. It's coming for the first time. And client said, hey, do performance testing for this application. Do whatever you want and tell me. Okay. In that case, as a performance tester, ideally we suggest test, endurance test, and scalability test. These three will assure that the application will not give any trouble to client. Okay. In future also, current trend and future trend. Okay. And stability, in terms of stability also. That's the reason we suggest these three tests by default. You take any of the major banking firms or anything, uh, these are the three types of tests that most of the projects choose to run. Okay. The spike testing, the volume testing, failover testing, these things will be a ad hoc requirement. Okay. These things will be ad hoc requirement. Those type of tests won't be performed every release. Every release we test is load test, scalability test, endurance test. Okay. Now the second point. Okay, we performed scalability test or whatever the test. Now we observed some issues. Okay, in scalability test, load test was absolutely fine. Scalability test, we found some minor issues. Now it's up to client whether it, because if client wants to take a risk, okay, because okay, it's after 3 months or 6 months, that's the, it's the trend is for after 3 months or 6 months. Okay, currently I want to go ahead with, for the current release, I go ahead, I want to go ahead with the existing load test results into production. Yes. See, end of the day, the role of the performance tester is to suggest or provide observations on what happened with the test that we ran. And then it's up it, and the final decision is for the client to take, whether he has to scale up, scale out. Okay, invest something in the infrastructure for future right away or in future. It's all the decision that should be taken by the client. From our end, we can only suggest to client that, hey, your application will support with this number of users. Okay, your application will support 200%. Yes, your application will support 300%. Your application cannot support beyond that. Like that, we will guarantee or upfront will inform client. Then it's up to the client to take a decision. Okay,
Yeah.
we are telling the risk upfront. Okay,
Yeah. Sure.
so what happens after that? It's up to him. It's up to him or her, whoever is the owner or product owner.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, now volume testing. Volume testing is a very rare type of testing that we do. I mean, rare in sense we don't frequently run. Okay, it is 99.99% similar to load test. Okay, I can mention it also. It is similar to load test, except, okay, except that there will be huge amount of data inserted into database intentionally. So what happens, I'll tell you. So this is exactly same as load test, guys. That means the number of users will be same. Okay, number of users will be same as load test. The duration also same as load test. Okay, now what is different? The difference is only with the amount of data in the database. Every application will have some database to store the application related data. Yes or no? Yes, right? So by default, we will run we will run the load test. In the load test, we will make sure that the database contains same amount of data as in the production. Let's say in production, in database you have 1 lakh records. In load test also, we make sure that, okay, where we run the load test, basically some specific environment we can run in some separate performance testing environment or a shared environment. We'll discuss that. But load test also, in whatever environment we run, we'll make sure that we almost have similar records. similar number of records. But in volume test, what we do is we intentionally dump or insert huge amount of data into database and see how the application is responding. For example, okay, we will intentionally dump some, let's say 4 lakh records by taking the help of DBA. Okay, so insert some 4 lakh records, just giving an example, with help of DBA, database administrator, because we cannot insert those many records directly, right? So we can take the help of DBA and dump all the data into database and then run load test. Then that becomes a volume test, nothing else. You can see run the same load test scenario, you can run. Only thing is, in the backend you increase the number of users, that's it. Now what does that mean? It means how the database is also performing. Specifically, how the database is performing. Okay, specifically how database is performing. Okay, how SQL queries and procedures are performing. Okay, how application is responding as a whole. Okay, so these things we will verify. So if there are any SQL queries, okay, in the backend, you know about SQL queries, right? So it will be something like, especially who are coming from non-IT, I'm just giving something. So there will be something called SQL queries, which will be something like this. So basically, they are used to retrieve data or insert data or to update data or delete data. So they perform some, CRUD operations. Okay, so mostly, let's say we retrieve data. So are you able to retrieve data on time, within a second, less than a second, with less than 2 seconds? Okay, how much time it is taking for a query to get data if you have 1 lakh records? How much time it is taking to get data from database for SQL query if we are having 4 lakh records? So that's about, so volume testing is mostly about the data, it's about database testing, how the database is performing. Okay, and at the same time, how the application is performing as a whole. Any questions? So that's why we do it rarely. Okay, only if application demands, only if client insists you to do, then only we'll do. Otherwise, we don't touch it.
So we are majorly focusing on database server rather than application server, or both of them here.
Both. I mean, as a whole, we are anyways testing. See, as a whole, we are anyways testing. So when you run a load test, so when you monitor database, parallelly we'll monitor application servers also, right? But primary focus will be on database queries. Okay. Uh, are there any are there any connection issues? Are there any query related issues? Are there any deadlocks? Okay, like that. Okay, so more of database side we can verify. Okay,
Okay.
so
Can we
yeah, tell me.
can we expect application slowness also due to this high value sometimes?
Obviously when SQL query takes more time, obviously that will impact in the front end. See, basically what will happen, where is it? Here. So this is your client, let's say browser, from where you are hitting the, let's say where you are clicking a link or clicking a button. Okay, so it will go to web server, then it will go to application server, it will go to database server. Okay, so this is DB. Tomorrow we'll discuss this. I mean, tomorrow instance, next session. So this is application server. This is web server. Let's say this is client or the browser from where you are clicking a link. Let's say you clicked on a link here. When you click a link, HTTP or HTTPS request will go to web server. From there, it will go to application server, and application server will further send to database server. So here, this application server will send a query to fetch some data. Now, here if the load is more, that means it has to filter more amount of records. That means it will send response little bit late, and when it sends response little bit late here, it will have impact in the overall response time. So normally, let's say we have 1 lakh records, guys. Okay, now a request was sent. Now here, okay, from here to here, it hardly taken 0.3 seconds. From here to here, it has taken some, let's say 0.5 seconds. Let's say here from here to here, it has taken 0.2 seconds. So overall, it is 1 second. Okay, now when you have 4 lakh records here, now let's say it has taken 1 second here, 0.6 second here, 0.2 second here, something like. Now overall it is 1.8 second. See, there is a difference. Why? Because application server sent some query to fetch data, and because there are huge number of records in database, it took more time to filter and get data. So then it took little bit more time here itself. There is a chance, then obviously it is impacting overall performance. Yes, right? So at the end of the day, the issue might be here, but it impacted the overall performance. Yes or no? Yes. Okay. So that's what we will discuss in future also when we discuss APM tool, where to see SQL queries. Okay, how to see SQL queries performing. We'll see in the APM tool session in our later on. Okay, so hope you understood about volume test. This is not that important. We can do it, as and when required, a kind of ad hoc requirement. Okay, so this is about volume test. And what else is there? Failover testing we will discuss in the next session, because there is a dependency of understanding what is a server, web server, app server, database server. We have to understand all those terms and then discuss failover testing. Okay. Then spike testing, normally spike testing is, just to understand how the application is responding when there is a sudden spike, when there is a sudden increase in terms of number of users, sudden decrease in terms of number of users, how the application is responding. Okay, I can suddenly increase the number of users from 10 to 100. Then what will happen? Suddenly I am decreasing the number of users from 200 to 10. What is happening? Okay, how the application is able to, whether the application is able to withstand the sudden increase or decrease in terms of load. Okay, see, we generally, in a normal load test or in a normal endurance test, we gradually increase the load. We gradually increase the load. We gradually decrease the load. We never do the sudden spike. Okay, the sudden spike we will do only if the client asks you to do the spike testing. Otherwise, not required. Okay, so it's all about sudden increase and sudden decrease of load, and see how the application is handling it. Okay, in the back end you have to verify when you suddenly increase the load, how the CPU is utilized, how the heap memory is utilized, how the response times are coming at that point of time. So all those things you have to verify in the spike testing. Okay, I'm just giving you a brief, because it's very rare, and it's a kind of ad hoc testing again. So these are the major types of performance testing, guys. Smoke testing is something generic which is not specific to performance. It is a common terminology in testing. Smoke testing we do, we generally run a smoke test before running a load test, before running endurance test, before running scalability test, before running stress test. For every type of major test that you run, before that you run a smoke test. Why? We run smoke test to make sure that our scripts are working fine, to make sure that the application is up and running. Okay, the amount of load that we put in smoke test is very minimal. For example, a normal load test, the number of users are 500. Okay, in smoke test you run with 10-20 users. That's it. Why we run smoke test? First of all, to verify the end-to-end process, whether everything is happening fine or not. Our scripts are working fine, application is responding, no issues in application is not down, application is up and running. Now when I run a smoke test with very minimal users of 5, 10, 20 users for 10-15 minutes, and if that smoke test is successful, then I'm good to go and run a load test or endurance test or whatever it is. So let's say tomorrow you are planning to run a load test. Now today evening or tomorrow morning, you run a smoke test, and then you give a signal to all the team, to all the stakeholders, to entire application team. You give a go. Okay, you say that whether you are go or no go to run a load test. If your smoke test is successful, you are go to run a load test. If your smoke test is a failure, you are no go. Okay, you are saying that you are no go to run a load test. So basically, it's a kind of initial test that we run before any major test. Every time you run a load test or endurance or whatever major test type of test, you run a smoke test. with very minimal number of users with some 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. That's it. Any questions? Okay, so this file, I'm going to save it and I'm going to send it over to you for reference. Okay, so somewhere, okay, I'm going to save it here. So I just saved it as types of PT. Any questions? Okay, I do have slides for these also. I will send across. I mean, once we complete initial, 1 second. So once we complete initial sessions, right? Initial demo sessions, right? Okay. So I will send it across. All the documents, whoever has registered, right? Everything will be sent to you. So see, I do have slides for all of these. Okay, I just used Notepad today for explaining or for just typing, Notepad in Notepad. See, I do have everything. Okay, I'll just send all these slides to you. No problem. Okay, so this topic we didn't discuss. Tomorrow we'll discuss. I mean, next session we'll discuss this topic. Any questions for today?
Sanity test is not important in the performance testing field.
Uh, we are doing smoke test, right? It's like sanity only. I mean, in smoke test also, we will ensure that we are checking the end-to-end flow, right? So it's a kind of small sanity only. So here mostly we call it as smoke testing. See, sanity testing is something which you do after every deployment. Okay. So whenever developer deploys code, you run a sanity test and see whether the environment is proper. Okay. It didn't break anything. Okay. Smoke is also something similar to that. Okay, but here we are running a smoke test saying that, okay, before running a major test, I'm running a smoke test just to ensure that everything is fine. If
Can we
smoke test
differentiate
fails,
between the smoke and sanity?
that's what I'm telling. After every deployment we run sanity test, but here we are not running after every deployment, right? We are running only before the load test. Developer will deploy, basically sanity is mostly done in functional testing. Okay, it is not
Okay.
mostly concentrated on in the performance. In performance we say that smoke test. Okay, so every time you run a smoke test before any major test, if smoke test fails, you cannot run a load test. Okay, you cannot run load test. If smoke test is successful, then only you are good to go and run the load test or whatever the other type of test is.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
so
Got it.
let me stop recording here for today. Any other questions?